Hey, what's going on, everyone? And welcome to another episode of Talking in Bits. But before we actually get to the show, I wanted to remind you guys that Talking in Bits is completely 100% audience funded. What that basically means is that you will never have to sit through no ads while you're listening to Talking in Bits. And the only way we can continue to do that and have been able to do that is with contributions and donations with great listeners such as yourself. So in order to keep that spirit alive, there's a few ways that you can actually donate to the show. My favorite way is Podcasting 2.0 apps. There's a bunch of them out there, but my two favorite are Fountain app and Breeze. And with these apps, it's basically like any other podcasting app. You can subscribe to Talking in Bits. You can load up some sats into the wallet, and you can set how many sats per minute you think Talking in Bits is worth or how much value you're receiving from Talking in Bits. You can do this from both of those apps. Another really cool feature in these apps, these Podcast 2.0 apps, is the Boost feature. And what the Boost feature is basically you get to pick a certain amount of sats that you want to send in, and you can embed a message inside of that transaction into the show. And what I'm going to do is, week to week, the best ones that come in, I'm going to read them and give shout outs here live on the show. So that's another way that you can help keep this ad-free and keep this content rolling. If you're not using the Podcast 2.0 apps, then you can head on over to talkinginbits.com/donate. And there you'll find various links to be able to send in Lightning, to be able to send on-chain, and even to Payname. So go check out the website. That's another way to contribute. And if you're listening to us on the legacy outlets like YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, then you could do the good old-fashioned leave a review, share, subscribe. All that stuff helps and helps us float up higher so more people can get this value and more people could get everything that we want to provide to our listeners. So once again, we appreciate you. The only reason we've been able to keep this up is because of y'all, and we want to keep that going for as long as we can. All right, without further ado, on to this week's episode.
Scarcity premium. Cannot exceed 21 million. The hardest money that has ever been invented.
I also made the case for owning Bitcoin. The quintessence of scarcity premium.
Scarcity premium.
It's literally the only large tradable asset in the world that has a known fixed maximum supply. By its design, the total quantity of Bitcoins cannot exceed 21 million.
Cannot exceed 21 million.
Bitcoin is the hardest money that has ever been invented.
If you don't have my private key, you cannot spend my Bitcoin, period. And this is the power of Bitcoin.
It's the first time we figured out how to create true property that you can take possession of with full custodial rights.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Talking in Bits, where we walk you through Bitcoin bit by bit so we can provide you with the information you need to succeed and persist. Back where episode 69, where we're going to go completely different here. So as you guys know, this is usually a Bitcoin show, but you know, when we think about Bitcoin, we think about sovereign money. We think about sovereign individuals. We think about just being sovereign overall. So I had this idea to basically start bringing on guests that are not necessarily Bitcoin related, but they're sovereign related. And the first person that I had in mind is Zo here, who I've actually talked to on my previous show a year ago. Zo, how's it going, brother? How you doing?
I'm doing well, man. It's good to be on.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you. Like I just told the listeners, Bitcoiners love to be sovereign. Bitcoiners like to talk about sovereignty, and there's no, there's no bigger realm than just being self-sovereign in your defense. And that's where you come in, good sir. And our last conversation was just, not only very knowledgeable for me, but I think the listeners will get a lot from your knowledge.
I appreciate that, man. Yeah, I'm not super Bitcoin savvy. I dabble a little bit myself, but I think in terms of what you just said is being sovereign, it's about big part of it's self-reliance. Whether it's our own currency, whether it's cryptocurrency, whether it's barter and trade, it's the ability for us to maintain our lifestyle and our well-being and to care for those around us that we care about without having to necessarily rely on others. And I think it's something that's lost in society today as a whole. We've gotten so accustomed to living in safe environments with services we can count on and those kinds of things, that when we get hit by things that still happen today that we hear about, it's a natural disaster or a supply chain disruption or something like that, and then all of a sudden shelves are flying bare and things are going on, and you got a little bit of chaos, maybe some civil unrest, and all of a sudden you realize again that, these emergency services are nice, and having these extra things all around us that we use day to day are pretty cool and all, but at the end of the day, we're on our own, at least until things get back to quote unquote normal.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think most of the times that I speak for myself, but I think the most of the time when people bump into that oh shit situation is, first of all, when it comes, that's one. But the second point is when they realize that they can't do shit about it themselves, right? Like they're kind of like assed out into the corner, and that's a scary feeling, right? And so, like you were saying, self-reliance on bigger entities like these services, and then much higher up like the government. It never really seems to work out in the end when shit finally comes to hit the fan. Those services actually work against you in certain situations and in certain stories. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's layers, right? We look at lessons we should have learned from things like Katrina, from the peaceful protests over the last couple of years that we've seen out there, from the lockdowns, from the supply chain issues. And the reality is until services are restored, until things are back to normal and what we expect, we are completely on our own. I think even here in Texas, if you remember a couple of years ago, we had the Snowmageddon where we got hit by a deep freeze that just completely disrupted our natural gas supply chain. People were freezing, roads were completely frozen over. Emergency services couldn't get to things. And, in those moments, you're trying to figure out how to stay warm, how to eat. I personally had a incident at home where we had almost a medical emergency. We had a kid who going between the cold and things that were going on, got a little bit dehydrated, passed out, and hit head hard on the concrete. And we had to deal with how to, get the kid into a safe environment, assess how severe the situation was. Was it a medical emergency? What we were going to do about that? And thankfully, it wasn't too crazy, and we had done enough to be prepared and self-reliant, at least for a short period of time, to be able to get through it. And it's not necessarily about doing it yourself and being the lone wolf and going completely solo. We had friends that we relied on, we had neighbors that we relied on, but the minute that emergency hits, even though maybe your first lifeline that you reach for is your neighbor, well, your neighbors across the street, they have their own stuff going on. They may not be able to come to you right away, or heck, they may not be home. Maybe they bailed out and they're somewhere else. So it's fine to have these layers of support that we have around us, but it starts with yourself, right? If you can't, to a certain extent, be able to take care of yourself, well, how can you expect to help take care of others? Whether that's your immediate family, whether that's your neighbors, whether that's your friends, whether that's your community, whether that's your city, your county, your state. You can go further out as far as the different layers that we have to participate in and to rely on to a certain extent.
Now, and like, where do you think that for a person who just literally just heard what you said and it's like, holy shit, I wouldn't be prepared for that situation. Does it begin, in your opinion, at a neighborhood level, or is it more like, the city that you're in, the state? Like, where does this, this attitude of sovereign, almost even libertarian, if you want to put it at that, is that, an effect of living in the right state, the right neighborhood, the right city, or all the above?
Honestly, I'm going to go a little bit further down and say it starts with self, right? Having that mindset, understanding the reality of things, understanding that dangers are real. Stuff happens, whether that's an electrical fire that happened in your house, or whether you slipped and fell, or whether it's the middle of the night and you've got a home invasion to deal with, and it doesn't even have to be at home. You could be out at the grocery store. It can happen any place, anywhere, right? So the first thing that you have to come to terms with, regardless of where you live and the influences that you have around you and who you can rely on, it comes down to, what am I going to do in these situations? And to a certain extent, it's part of growing up and coming to terms with, you have to take care of yourself. You have to be responsible, and you are accountable for what it is that you do. So, and part of it, I guess, is a lost art in many ways, but the concept of saving money. You know, we're not even going to get into cryptocurrency, but just being able to have not having to live paycheck to paycheck, because a very common emergency that people run into is many times throughout their life is you get laid off.
Yeah.
Right now you got you may have debts like the majority of Americans and adults do today that you've got to pay. And even if you don't have those debts, you may need to acquire some goods, you know, such as gasoline, maybe a fresh set of clothes to go to that next job interview, right? And those are contingencies that you put in place. And it starts with the mindset of things are going to happen. There are some things that are more likely to occur, and the things that could occur have a different impact. You know, they can be very mild and annoying to catastrophic. There's actually a study on this that we do in many different industries, which is just risk analysis, right? And the reality is that their life is full of risks, and some are more likely to become a reality. And so you've got to have mitigations and plans in place to reduce the likelihood of that risk becoming a reality. And you've also got contingency plans that need to be put into place to deal with that risk when it becomes a reality. And again, it's with something as simple as saving money for those situations where you have a temporary or permanent loss of income. You know, sometimes you can't deal with that. It's as simple as realizing you are going to get hurt, and so having a first aid kit handy. And you know me, I talk about guns all the time, right? But
yeah,
not a lot of people have been in a gunfight. And the likelihood of being in a gunfight is really, really low. The likelihood of needing a gun for a self-defense situation is relatively low as well. But the likelihood of you needing a Band-Aid is pretty darn high.
Yeah.
Right. So,
yeah.
Or beyond that, it doesn't have to be just a Band-Aid. But, you know, like for me, part of what I put in my pocket every day when I go out, and not in a backpack, I'm talking in a pocket next to me, is a personal trauma kit. You know, something that I can stop the bleed, a major bleed that could be a life-threatening type of situation that could happen from being in a car accident, slipping and falling outside, a couple dumb kids or punks decide to throw rocks at you, or decide to play the knockout game or something like that, and you get hurt, or somebody you know, or it could be a neighbor, it could be a total stranger gets hurt, they're bleeding out. You've got tools on you to help deal with that emergency and potentially save a life, whether that's yourself, your own, or somebody else's. So it starts there with the mentality. From there, it's expanding that to your immediate circles, right? Your inner circles, whether that's your friends and your family, and building that support system and getting them involved with it. And it doesn't have to be about thinking it's the end of the world. You know, it's starting with the simple things, man. You know, like I said, the first aid kit, the saving a little extra money, the stashing away a little Bitcoin, whether it's for investments or for, again, some sort of emergency, banking system goes down, total collapse. I don't know, things can happen, but having a little bit of something there to help you get through that. And, you know, for me, like I said, the big thing is firearms. I'm big into self-defense. I'm big into being the master of your own fate, per se, right? I don't want to be at the whim or the mercy of an attacker who's trying to rob me or who's trying to rape me. I mean, I think crazier things have happened in this world. I want to have the tools and the means and the capacity to, in that, should that moment present itself, to have options to say, no, man, I don't think so.
Yeah.
No, you're going to keep going. Okay. Let me forcefully change your mind.
Yeah, that's huge, especially in the Bitcoin community, because, you know, a lot of the examples you were given were obviously to be prepared for a situation, but slightly different than that is to avoid anybody exerting power over you, right? So in the bigger scheme of things, we talk about, you know, if we're talking about governments, then to avoid the tyranny, right? To be able to say no to certain things and say, well, wait a minute, that it's not your rules, it's my rule. And that's a little bit something that, although I do agree with you on, you know, preparing for injury or, you know, for a situation where you got to defend yourself, I'm also, you know, I'm very focused on the, like, what people would say not being rug pulled, right? Where it's like, you know, you basically fall asleep at the wheel, and then similar to what's going on, and we can get into it right away, but what's going on with all these shootings that are going on and the public media A lot of people, including myself, are under the impression that this is just a coup, right? This is just an attempt to basically weaken the society to take away our guns, right? And that's a situation where, although there's tragic things that are happening, and there's obviously, children and people being hurt, we need to kind of step back a little bit and understand that if we kind of bend the knee in this situation, then it could lead to disastrous results for us as human beings. What's your take on that whole?
I mean, you're spot on. I was having a discussion the other day with a friend who thinks very differently than I do on a lot of these topics, right? And and one of the arguments that was made is, well, we need more reasonable, responsible controls. Maybe it is okay to give up the AR-15s that they're going after right now, and because that could potentially save a life. And it's like, whoa, slow down. Let's talk about what this means, right? And one of the suggestions that came in there was a we have registration and we have licensing and mandatory training, and I'm like, look, first of all, and this goes straight into sovereignty, is maybe today we have a relatively what's the word I'm looking for here? Benevolent government. I don't think so, but let's assume for argument's sake that it is. And they have no ill intention. They believe that by tracking these things, they'll be able to better track down crimes, and that by having these rules in place, it'll be harder for criminals or would-be criminals to get their hands on these particular tools. And we've got this registry to kind of help with that. And again, I'll argue all day long till I'm blue in the face that that's not going to have the effect that they're looking for. But again, for argument's sake, let's assume benevolent government and that registration type scheme would actually make things safer. That's cool. That's today. But as we know, administrations change. New leadership comes in, and maybe it's not the next administration. Maybe it's not the second one after that. Maybe it's 10, 25 years down the line. There's no guarantee that there would be a political mindset change where now they're saying, well, you know what? We changed our minds. We really don't want anybody to have any guns. And now they're sitting on a list where they want to take them. Or let's just say they've gone from benevolent to nefarious. And now they want to go and round up all the people who have or had previously firearms because they tend to have a political ideology or something that they no longer want to tolerate, and kill them, round them up, put them in a camp. I don't know, whatever it is, right? You've given that information there. Well, you've lost a little bit of that sovereignty because they know who those people are. You've given them a tool that may not be misused today. It may have been provided in good faith today, but is now misused in the future, right? So that to me is places where we talk about, let's talk about what we're giving up if we're going to do these things. Not today. Let's not think short term. Let's think long term. Because if we go back and we look through history, well, guess what? That's exactly what I'm just suggesting that would never happen here. And I'm saying that in quotes because it has happened on a smaller scale. Again, I'll use Katrina as an example there that people tend to forget about. Guns were being confiscated. But we look at it today and you've given up a little piece of your sovereignty. You've given up a little bit of your security for whatever measures there, because you've now given this information to other people. And the same thing goes with the AR-15 and just weapons that they're potentially looking to ban is, if that happens and those things do get registered, do get rounded up, bought back, which again, government didn't own them. They're not really buying it back. They're buying it for the first time. They're also buying it by force. Because it's not necessarily all of them are willfully for sale, which is another topic there. But you've lowered the capacity for the common man to forcefully say no to the government when they decide to be nefarious or step over those limits, right? Because you no longer have those arms.
You've shown to do that.
Yeah, I mean, historically, that's happened many, many, many times, right? And for us to believe that this time will be different is, again, the definition of insanity, doing the same thing, expecting a different result.
Right.
But it's crazy. And, the shootings that we've had, they're tragic.
Yeah.
But at the same time, and, talking about hypotheticals, had I been there at the school present with an AR-15 and my kid was in there and the mass murderer happened to cross my path, yeah, I would have lit him up.
Yeah.
Not because it's my responsibility or my duty to do that, but because I want to keep my kids safe. And I would have done that with an AR-15. Like, well, if you wouldn't have had an AR-15 and you wouldn't have had an AR-15, then it would have been potentially different. Well, maybe. But frankly, if the mass murderer is in there beating kids' heads in with a baseball bat, I still want an AR-15 because it is a much, much more effective tool for me able to neutralize that threat as quickly as possible. And I don't want that to be a fair match. I want it to be as lopsided in my favor than it is the other person's.
Yeah. What is it about what is it specifically that is the AR-15? Why do they continue to target the AR-15? And that's like the most commonly brought up point. Like, why isn't it just handguns in general, right?
I wish I had a good answer for that. I've got a lot of speculation as to why it is.
Yeah.
Specifically the AR-15. The best answer I can come up with is and I'll be the first to admit when we talk about it, it's a fighting rifle. By its design, it was designed to carry an intermediate rifle cartridge, which is a low recoiling, low weight, fast moving projectile that is designed to penetrate fleshy bits very effectively and put threats down. I mean, that's we can get into the cartridge design, and that's not necessarily what that cartridge is for, but it's very, very capable of it. But when you look at the AR-15 as a weapons platform, it's a lightweight rifle. It doesn't recoil very much. Can be customized for many different applications, from shooting close quarter type situations and engagements to longer distances. And because it is such a mild recoiling rifle and so configurable, it is easy to learn. And once you develop proficiency with it, it is a very capable tool, right? So if I was to look at it again nefariously, if I was trying to disarm the population, I would probably be targeting that type of rifle as well too, because while the population could certainly be dangerous with other weapons, that is a weapon that is widely available. Like I said, easy to use, easy to learn. That you can teach people how to fight very effectively with very quickly. That's my guess.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, like in this hypothetical scenario where the people revolt against their government, and the civilians are now building up these militias, right, to go against. Like, you don't want the militia to have this very effective tool to be able to fight back. Is that kind of like TLDR there?
That's exactly it, right? It's an effective tool. It's very effective at fighting. That's why it's been so popular. Well, the military version of it is different. It's got its select fire features, and but for the most part, it's the same operation. You charge it the same way, the same magazines, everything except the internal firing control group that allows for select fire, burst fire. The giggle switch is it's identical. It's a good fighting weapon, right? The giggle switch is the safety selector on the AR-15. For civilians, we only get two options. We get the safety mode, which once it's unsafe, you pull the trigger, nothing happens because everything's locked into place. Or you switch it to fire, where you pull the trigger once and a round is discharged and a projectile leaves the front of the barrel. And then in the military, you can go to the auto or burst fire mode, which flip it again. And now when you pull the trigger down and hold it down, it continues to fire until you let go of the trigger. So it's a term, term of endearment that we have in the gun culture. We call it the giggle switch, because when you go full auto, it makes you giggle. Or the fun switch, that's another one for it. Just different terms for it. But yeah, when I say giggle switch, that's what I'm talking about. It's the selector on the rifle that allows it to go from no fire to semi-automatic function to full automatic function.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Now, another thing that I think, especially listeners to the show that may be on the either on the fence or just don't understand, the gun community, although all of this that you're saying sounds extremely dangerous, and in the wrong hands, it could be, obviously, it could be extremely dangerous. I find that the gun community is one of the safest communities that I've ever been a part of. Please speak a little bit about that.
I mean, the just about every single gun owner that I've met, they take safety very seriously. They value life. They understand what these weapons are capable of, and call them what they are. When for me, I wear a pistol every single day. I go outside with it. I go to the grocery store. In fact, I'm wearing a pistol right now. When I wake up in the morning, it's one of the first things that goes on me, and it doesn't come off my hip until I go to bed. And when I'm out there, the reality is in my belt, in the holster that's attached to my belt, I have a weapon that I could use to basically hold the power of life or death over anybody. That is, when you said it was a dangerous tool, yeah, it is. It's designed to be that way. But when we talk about gun culture as a whole, is we have these things primarily because, well, one, we're responsible with them, we're careful with them. Anytime that we bring anybody in to say, hey, I want to learn how to shoot, you will hear every single person, first things first, is safety, 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 safety. We got 4 rules that we kind of live and die by. Well, probably shouldn't say that we live by. But it's all about that. It's about community. It's about the protection of life. It's about strength and unity, and it's a wonderful group of people. It really is. We have a lot of fun with it, but we respect the weapon for what it is. We know what it's capable of, and we treat it with the due respect and safety and responsibility that goes along with it. There's a saying that I've caught myself saying more and more as folks are getting into carrying a defensive weapon on them like I do. And the reality is you are responsible for every single bang and accountable for every hit, whether you hit what you intended to or not, or whether or not you meant for that thing to go bang, right? I don't care if it was accidental, if it was negligent, or whatever the case might be. You're responsible for every single time that firearm is discharged, and you're responsible for whatever that projectile hits. Accountable for it, and that's the mentality that we go by. So yes, very safe community, lot of fun with firearms. Try not to get too much into that, because I know that's not necessarily the main topic that we're talking about here today, but I spend a lot of time with it.
It's a misconception that I want to address, though, because, it's one thing to take my word for it, right? Just an average, gun owner, right? I'm not, I guess, what you would call an expert level, but something that even I, like you just said, take extremely serious. I have children, I'm around children. I also try to carry on me, not right when I get up like you do. That's actually impressive. But yeah, I'm starting to build up that tolerance and that discipline, which is much more important. And I want listeners to take away a bunch from this episode, but definitely that aspect of it, that although the mainstream media would want you to think that this is like, people walking around nilly-willy Wild West style, just kind of just shooting up because you step on their toe or anything like that, that's not reality. That's not actually what's happening out here.
It certainly isn't. And, you mentioned a lot of good things there too. It's the first thing, that this community is about information and knowledge, right? We demystify the weapon. What is it? How does it work? How does it function? How do you safely operate it? How do you behave with it? Like I said, we've got 4 main rules that we harp on, which is, assuming there's variations of it, but basically comes down to treating every gun like it's loaded, never pointing at anything that you don't want, that shouldn't be shot, never putting your finger on the trigger until you're actually ready to shoot, and knowing what is between you, the target, and beyond, right? Because that's effectively where the bullet's going to go and what could potentially hit, or where it's going to come to rest if it decides to go down there, right? So we harp on those 4 rules all the time. And every time that I've been in a course, or I've been, which I do, I take a lot of training, or I've taught, whether it's my neighbor or my kids, I've taught them to shoot as soon as possible and teach them about firearms as quickly as possible. for the same reasons, I want them to know what they are. I don't want them to think that, oh, it's cool, let's see what happens, and the curiosity killed the cat type of situation where you have accidental or negligent discharges of those firearms by kids on other kids, and you have unintentional deaths, which are just tragic, right? So it's a lot about educating them on them, understanding how to safely operate them, how to safely handle them, how to be safe with them. Like, so we've got the 4 rules there, but how to safely put it into a holster, pull it out of a holster, when to point the weapon here, when to put your finger on the trigger, when to actually shoot, when to not to shoot. When not to shoot is probably even more important than when to shoot, as far as things that are taught. And it's a constant thing. We also talk about how to properly secure your firearms, whether it's in your home, on your person, in a safe. There's different options for that. And being mindful that it's not just you who's going to be around them, but what's the foot traffic in your house look like? What, the places where you're at, if you're going to secure your weapon in your vehicle, how do you do that in such a way that you're, generally it's something that I frown upon. Your car is not a holster. You don't want to leave it there. I can get into that topic a little bit more, but if you are going to, how can you actually do that in such a way that you minimize the chance of your firearm being stolen and ended up in the wrong hands? How do you secure your firearm when you're transporting it, when you've got other passengers in your vehicle, and depending on your vehicle layout, whether it's going in your trunk, do you put it in a case? Do you lock the case? Do you leave the ammunition with it? Do you separate it out? Some of these are legal concerns as well too, that we have to be aware of, so that, and I harp on this all the time too, to new folks that are new to firearms, to say, hey, make sure you know the laws, make sure you learn them, because if you do something like, in certain states, you cannot transport a loaded firearm in your vehicle. It has to be in its own case, separated from the ammunition. If you get pulled over for a traffic infraction, and for some reason the police officer has probable cause to search your vehicle, they found that weapon being transported in a manner that's not legal. Well, guess what? You just got caught riding dirty, and you're going to catch a charge unintentionally when you didn't know you were doing anything wrong. Right. So there's a lot that goes into this. And that, when we talk about gun culture in the community, it's about knowing all of these things. It's about how to be a good human being, how to be safe with those things, and how not to get yourself in trouble with them.
Yeah, that's extremely important, especially in our previous conversation. We talked a lot about Massachusetts and where I'm at now, and just how, really, really constricting it is, like, to be able to do the basics of the basics. And I, to be honest with you, need to get a little bit more versed. I know I can conceal carry and still have it in the car, but I think to a certain, I'm probably saying this wrong, but a certain size of the weapon definitely needs to be in its own case. Like say you're walking around with a 12 gauge, I think that definitely needs to be in the case, in the trunk, with no ammunition inside of it. But you're right. I would be caught riding dirty if I was wrong on that example, and for doing something as simple as maybe just trying to defend myself and my loved ones. Now I end up in jail, and right. That's a shit show.
It is.
Yeah. I talked to you over the DMs, making the move down to Austin, and just one of the first few things I want to do when I touch down is basically that I want to get to around really good gun owners, hopefully you and others, get to a good range and do it consistently, because I actually got banned from the only gun range that's within an hour distance of me. And it wasn't because I was doing anything stupid. Well, I guess according to them, it was stupid. It was because I was using buckshot with a 12 gauge, which to this day, I still can't get a legit answer as to why. Like, there was no signs that were saying that I couldn't do this. They actually sell it there, which is even more mind-boggling to me. But, what I walked away with it's the fucking the rules of the state. It's just nonsense. Why the fuck would that even happen?
Yeah, no, there are. So it depends a lot on the range. Is it an indoor range by chance?
It is an indoor range. Yep.
Okay, so a lot of indoor ranges frown upon that, because they've got the vast majority of them use you've got the firing line, and you've got a little control where you bring the target close to you. The hanger for the target, you unhook your target, you hang a new target on, then you hit the controls to move the target further out. So you've got these rail systems and cables that go along the top of the lines that go out there, and the hangers themselves can actually be damaged. So with buckshot, you've got a spread of of holes that a spread of pellets that are going to make multiple holes on the target. And if you're not careful with them, you can damage the equipment that those targets ride on. And so a lot of indoor ranges will, even though they'll sell you buckshot, will have a rule of say, hey, if you're going to be shooting a shotgun, it's going to be slugs only, because they want to make sure that you're controlled with the projectile going down range and you don't accidentally damage the equipment. I've even been to some outdoor ranges where they have shotgun specific ranges, and in the rifle ranges, they don't want you doing that, because even though they might not have the fancy targets that move mechanically up and down the line, you're probably, during a ceasefire, people are going to go down range and put their targets on a target stand and see if you've got pieces of wood that aren't necessarily expensive, but if you're peppering them with buckshot, you're going to end up breaking those sticks all over the place, and that just carries a lot of cost associated to maintaining those things. So it is there, but it is a shame that they weren't clear about the rules up front with you.
Yeah.
But it's, you know.
Why did it take for you to give me that logic and not the actual like owner or the workers of the establishment? It's very strange. Because that actually does make sense. And I would have just been like, oh, okay, cool. Like I had no, like, there was no motive or anything that I needed to use buckshot. I could have easily just went slug. It just wasn't explained to me properly, and there was no signage anywhere. So
yeah,
I wanted to use buckshot, so I did. I mean, and that's what I had on me that day. So very strange.
Oh man, that stinks. Yeah, but when you get out here, man, for sure, we'll definitely go shooting. We'll get you set up with. We've got a bunch of really good gun clubs out here, and private ranges that you can join. We've got. I was talking with some friends because I shoot competitively, and pretty much every single weekend within a 2-hour drive of Austin, there is a match somewhere where you can go shoot competitively, which I strongly urge gun owners to go out and shoot matches, because you get to work on things and practice shooting skills that you wouldn't be able to do at a public range where it's static and controlled, all those environments are controlled environments, but you're limited to what you can do because of the way that those ranges operate. So there's that, and then
competitive, you like sticking and moving. Is that what you mean? Like as opposed to just standing there?
Yeah, I'll circle back on that here in just a second. The other thing I was going to mention is we've got a lot of really good trainers and training schools. So lots of good training out here to get your hands on if you're going to be in the Austin area, and I'll get you introduced to that. So when going back to competitive shooting, the way that they're set up is, and there's a couple different style matches that operate a little bit differently, but for the most part, you're going to go to a range. It's going to have multiple shooting bays set up where they set up a shooting stage. Depending on the doctrine of the competition that you're shooting in, you're basically going to have a multitude of targets that you're going to engage either in a particular order or an order that you decide for yourself to be the fastest or most effective or tactical or however you want to phrase it. And you've got that whole bay to yourself to shoot it as fast as you can and try to score top points. So on the signal, you're going to be getting you're going to be pulling the gun out of your holster, which is something that you can't really do in a lot of private ranges or the public ranges that you were describing here, where you go and you rent a lane and you go shoot down. They're not going to let you work from the holster. You're going to be running around obstacles, and you're going to have walls and cover to deal with, and you're going to have a combination of targets that you can shoot, targets that you can't shoot, and target transitions, moving, using cover, shooting around corners, shooting behind barricades, and those kinds of things. Those are things that most people who don't have their own private ranges to go to and take the time to set up those types of environments are just never going to practice. And the favorite part for me for the competitions is that every time that I go out to one of those on the weekend, there'll be 5 or more stages that are set up. Is that they're all different. And every weekend, it's a new challenge with a new configuration, something that I haven't done before, that you'll have to figure out and work through that, right? So it's not just aiming the gun, squeezing the trigger, and trying to get the bullet right on the bullseye. It's more of figuring out how you're going to move, how to be fast about it, how to. It's more problem solving and more thinking that's involved besides just shooting. So, and again, those are all wonderful skills to develop, and it's a lot of fun to do. It'll ruin the static public range for you, because it's like, okay, well, yeah, for me, when I go to those ranges, it's kind of like, well, I'm either checking ammo, checking my sights, making sure things are sighted in. Not really a lot of drills that I can run there to help me practice higher level skills.
Yeah. Now, is there basically, like, how do I put it? Is there a learning curve in that situation? Like, I can't just walk into this competitive training, can I? Or is it something?
Why not?
Oh, okay. I'm asking. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to embarrass myself here either.
No. So the matches that I'm talking about, what we call tier 1 or level 1 or local level matches, right? These are open to basically anybody who wants to shoot.
Okay.
You sign up for them, you show up, you pay your match fee, which is usually between $25 to $30, maybe a little bit less if you're a member of the club or not a member of the club.
Yep.
And as long as you have the very basic equipment, which is a safe holster, a firearm, the appropriate amount of ammunition, ways to carry extra magazines with you if it's a match that's going to require magazine changes, and you can shoot safely, meaning the 4 basic rules of safety, you can participate. And it's really awesome, because when you're there and you tell them, hey, you know what, I'm brand new, I've never done this before, walk me through it. They're going to walk you through, okay, well, here are some of the additional safety rules. We'll talk about the 180 rule, which basically means your gun, as you move forward up and down the bay, there's a plane that moves with you, that if you cross that plane, we call it the 180 plane. Basically, if you turn more than, like if you stick your arms out left and right, that's kind of like the plane that goes with you. If you cross that, that's the 180 line. You get disqualified, because it's potentially unsafe, because now the gun is pointing uprange instead of downrange. But they'll walk you through what the procedure is, and for most even relatively novice shooters, people who have just started, I would say make sure you know how to the basics of the firearms. Your basic rules, how to load the firearm, how to unload the firearm, how to manipulate the safety, the basic operation. As long as you've got that down, you can go shoot one of these matches, and they will walk you through, the rules of the game. And if you do go do that, and I don't care how good of a shooter you are or aren't, if you're new to a match, your first objective on your first match is to finish without getting disqualified. So in other words, learn how to complete a match safely. Once you get there, now we start going about, okay, let's get you to be a little bit more competitive, right? And figure out things that we can do to tweak your gear to make you a little bit faster, what skills you need to work on, and that kind of thing to make you a better, more competitive shooter. But no, it's definitely open. And like I said, when you get out here, you give me a holler. Within the first month that you're here, I will take you out to one of those matches, and I'll get you shoot one of those.
Oh man, looking forward to it already.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I not only did I think it was very stagnant, and I mean, I wouldn't say boring, but yeah, that just standing there in one lane thing, it's only so exciting for so long.
Oh man, and wait till you start getting into moving targets. So like we'll have these sets of targets that'll be activated by we call them poppers, which is basically it's a steel target that's down on the ground that when you shoot it with your 9mm, or most people shoot 9mm. You do a couple different calibers there, but the steel will knock over, and it'll have a cable attached to it that will pull a locking mechanism on another target that'll have a weight that operates on it. So it'll cause the target to swing back and forth, or to pop out from behind cover and back into it. So you'll have disappearing targets, turning targets, swinging targets, and now you've got to deal with not just you moving in a position and shooting cardboard that's not moving, but potentially targets that are moving as well too. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's what you would probably say the same. It's the closest thing to real life scenarios.
There's probably one that I would go further that's closer if you wanted to do that. So for me, the competitive shooting part helps you put your shooting skills to the test. It doesn't necessarily make you more prepared for It does do a couple things to help you be prepared for a self-defense encounter. The very first thing is that you're going to feel stress of competition, right? You're going to be on a timer. You're going to be shooting for score. Your peers and your friends are going to be observing you, right? And so just knowing that you're the center of attention because you've got a squad of 8 to 12 people, maybe more, sitting there all looking at you perform, that's a lot of stress that you feel. So you're going to feel an adrenaline dump, and you're going to feel the excitement, and you're going to choke a little, and you might make a couple mistakes or shoot the wrong target. Or this happened to me a couple times where you shot the same target 3 or 4 times more than you were supposed to, right? You were supposed to engage it once. I engaged that target 4 times. Because it messes with you. It messes with your ability to think. It messes with your ability to follow a plan. It messes with your ability to keep your sights on the target and to shoot it well. So that stress is definitely, it's part of what they call stress inoculation, meaning learning how to run a gun under stress, which is definitely beneficial to do if you're ever in a life and death scenario, because the stress levels will be high. But there is one other thing that we can do to help us prepare for that I think is probably more realistic or better preparation than competition, and that is attending force-on-force training. Force-on-force training are classes that are designed with simunitions, which are special guns with special types of ammunition, where you run through certain scenarios such as like home invasions or a convenience store robbery, or somebody going into a restaurant and decided to start shooting people, and all those types of things that kind of help you. Again, you're going to be under stress. You're actually potentially going to get shot at by these simunition guns, and there's protective equipment, but they will hurt if you get hit. So that will teach you a lesson. But it's about helping you develop the tactics that you need to primarily avoid the fight, to make sure that if you react within a justified level of force. You understand the legal ramifications of what's involved with it. And you get the same type of pressure because you have students and peers who are observing you, looking at your decision-making process. I did a force-on-force class about a year ago. I've got to double check here. And for me, it was one of the most eye-opening things that I could do as a shooter to help me prepare for that, because a lot of things that I was like, oh yeah, in this situation, I would do this. Well, all of a sudden I found myself in that situation and I was like, oh crap, I acted completely differently than I thought I would have. And you get to analyze why and learn why. So you learn a lot about yourself in that process.
That sounds fascinating. I think about like a professional athlete, right? Where it's like, you run the drill over and over again so that when it happens during the game time, you're ready.
Yeah, but I think what force on force would be is, if you're talking about martial arts, it would be sparring against your peer environment, right? It's you're fighting within a certain rules, right? You're not going to go to the ground. They're not going to punch you. They're not going to actually pull an actual knife and start stabbing you like you would in real life. So it's not for real. But it is that stressful environment because it's that scrimmage game, right? It's that thing where you're taking all the drills that you've learned and all of the tactics that you've developed, and you're putting them in a controlled environment to see how you would react and what that would be like. And part of that is there's also the human factor. So you'll have, in that class, you'll have other assistant instructors who will play, or sometimes other students who will play different roles, right? Might be the attacker, might be a crazy person. And so you've got to take the context cues, understand what it is that you're dealing with. And some of the real, like, we're getting way off sovereignty as a topic,
it's all good.
This is cool stuff, man.
Yeah.
So there's one scenario that I'm remembering here that we did. It was a home invasion scenario. I'm home alone. I'm the homeowner. There's nobody else around, and somebody's breaking in, just looking for stuff to take. Right. And I hear the hustling. I get up, and in my head, I'd gone, okay, well, if this is going to happen, I'm going to barricade myself in the room. These are the tactics that I had developed. Right? I'm going to barricade myself in a room. I'm going to call 911 on the phone and put the phone down. And then I'm going to announce myself to the invader, letting them know that they're armed. And if they continue to proceed into the house and they come into where I'm at, that I am armed and I will shoot. Right. And, you know, I've gotten into discussions where folks are like, well, no, you should go out of the room and you should face the attack. I'm like, well, I don't know if that person's armed. I don't know what that
Yeah.
person's doing. I kind of have an idea of where they are in my house. And sure, I might have the advantage that I know the layout and whatnot, but I don't want to get in a gunfight. I value my life, right? And I'm home alone. My kids aren't here. I don't have anybody else to protect. I'm going to do that. Well, in the stress of the situation, I started forgetting about the role that we were playing in the scenario that I was in. And then my concern about my kids of going, oh shit, because in my plan was I was going to gather my family and barricade into a room. So my own personal tactics came into play and I forgot about that. Actually, I didn't even call 911. I thought I did. I had a phone in my hand, but I froze. And so my stress levels are high. I wasn't doing what I had in mind. I had my own personal tactics now kind of bleeding in with what the scenario was for the class. And so I run out of the room and I start unloading on the dude, which is legally justifiable. Tactically, probably a bad idea. It turns out the dude was armed, and by the time that he went to go get his gun, I had already unloaded on him 3 or 4 times, and the instructor called the scenario over.
Yeah.
It would have been legally justified, but I put myself in harm's way. Turns out that the student or the assistant instructor who played the bad guy had been instructed that if I basically threatened force, that they would leave running because they were to assume that or to go into the scenario thinking that they were breaking into a house that they believed to be empty. So the minute that they learned that somebody else was present, they were supposed to bolt. And again, legally justified. But when you think about that in terms of what that scenario means,
Yeah.
it could have saved me legal trouble. It would have kept me from potentially getting hurt because I'm going to put myself in danger. It's just stuff.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, right? And so those are the things like when you get into these force and force types of classes that they really get you thinking beyond the, okay, dude broke into my house. What do? You shoot them. Maybe, yeah, probably, but there's a lot more context that goes into that. And then also the things that we have to think about for ourselves is how much risk are we willing to put ourselves into for what? And I'm not going to tell anybody else a decision they got to make for themselves. If somebody says, "Hey, you know what? No, not going to let somebody steal my 70-inch TV." I'm going to go in there, and so if somebody's stealing my 70-inch TV, I'm going to use lethal force. Okay, Castle doctrine applies. It would be considered legally justified, but you're running into your living room to save a 70-inch TV, and you don't know if this is a single dude who's armed who actually knows how to shoot, or he's got 3 buddies behind you, one with a shotgun that's going to blow your head off. Is it really worth risking your life over a 70-inch TV? You decide for yourself, right? I'm not going to make that decision for you, but that's what these classes are about.
Gotcha. And the answer is no, by the way. The TV is not. I don't care who is listening. If you're going to protect that TV, you don't listen anymore.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
yeah,
For
it's
sure.
an easy one. But I see that was a great example, though, of how, even though, because you do hear that, especially I grew up in the projects, right? So to me, it's very easy to, not only me have said it plenty of times, but I've heard people say, yeah, he comes up in here, I'm going to light his ass up, right? And it sounds very casual to say that, but it's not what happens in reality.
Well, I mean, okay, tough guy, you did that. But again, there's so many, just so many things that could go wrong in that scenario, man. That just, what's it worth to you? Now you turn that around, and you talk about third party defending others, right? So now instead of being the home scenario and whatnot, you're at a convenience store, and you think you're witnessing a robbery because some dude's got another person down on the ground at gunpoint. Well, it turns out that was actually a guy who legally defended himself with a firearm, has got the other guy down on the ground. Now you're shooting at a guy who didn't start anything. I mean, there's a lot in there in terms of what you've perceived, what you believe to be the truth, when you're going to put yourself in danger for other people, for yourself, for your kids. You've got to work through those things. And, this type of training is something, it's not the first class to tell people to go take. Oh, you bought yourself a gun, go do some force on force training. No, there's other things you got to learn first. But to a certain point, to really be prepared, or to take yourself to that next level of being prepared as an armed defender, you should go take these classes, because they're going to force you not just to learn some tactics, but they're going to force you to really do some soul searching to understand what it is that when you are going to act, when it's worth it to you, what you're willing to risk for what. And that's something that we talk about this in other self-defense courses, right? It's, if you've made these decisions for yourself before you're ever in that type of scenario, now you default to what your answers are. If you're presented with this scenario for the very first time and you haven't thought about these things, you're going to react a lot slower. This is actually what causes a lot of people to freeze in the moment, is that they're now thinking, and your stress levels are high, so your thinking process is actually going slower. We have a harder time under stress making high-level decisions, but you're stuck going, what do I do? Is this right? Is this the right reaction? And so that kind of training is just critical for getting you to that next level of being prepared to handle yourself appropriately in those types of scenarios.
Makes a ton of sense. Yeah. That's arguably, like you said, work your way up there, but arguably that's something that not only I want to take advantage of, but most people should to get ready for a potential real life situation. So Zo, I wanted to ask, it's not just me. I want to get my wife out there involved. You know, what would is there any variation in our lady listeners and something that they should keep in mind when it comes to not only maybe purchasing their first gun, but going through training? Would the recipe be the same as anybody who has a gun, or is it slightly different for the ladies?
Oh man, I have such a hard time answering this question because well, here's the thing, man, is I know what works for me.
Yeah.
Right. I found the guns and the equipment that works for me. I found a carry method that works for me. I found things that I enjoy doing on the weekends to help me with my skill development and those kinds of things. And so I would give the ladies and anybody else who's listening, who's thinking about it, say, slow down and start with understanding what your needs are. Okay. From that, run away from anybody who's like, oh, you need XYZ, and they're very absolute about it, right? Like, I if I could have $1 for every time I was at a gun store and a lady went to the counter and said, hey, I need a pistol, and the guy behind the counter pointed at a 38 special revolver. No, just stop. Just stop that. Go away. There's a lot of options. You know, it's about finding the gun that fits you, that works well for your hand size and your body. You know, we might have talked about this in the last show, but I've said it a million times. It's like buying shoes, man. You don't buy any shoes. You got to make sure the shoes are the right size and that they're designed for the type of tasks so that you wear them for the things that you're going to be doing. Yeah. There's many handgun options. So you got to find something that's going to work, that's going to interface well with you. Number one, it has to be a reliable firearm, because if it's not reliable and you can't rely on it to save your life, what's the point? Right. But then it's got to be something that's going to work for you and your lifestyle, right? So it might be, for some people, it might be a smaller firearm. For some people, it might be a larger handgun. Start there. Then we get into carry methods and, we get into what works for me and the way that I dress and whatnot may not work for somebody who wears a sundress 6 days out of the week, right? So we've got some different considerations there and finding something that works well for them. There's a lot of options. What I would suggest if you're getting started is there's some really, really good training schools that do a basic kind of introduction to defensive firearms courses, where you can go and you can try different things. They'll talk about different carry methods, and ladies in particular, just because, I just do not, for some reason, I have never really developed the desire to share the same fashion choices that some of the ladies do.
Nah, in 2022? Nah.
I mean, I'm not, if that's your thing or not your thing, I don't really care, I mean, but we're just different, right? There's different body morphologies, different attires that we wear, different clothing selections, those kinds of things. Yeah. There is a group called A Girl and a Gun. I believe they're nationwide, but we've got a pretty active chapter here in the Austin area. And my suggestion would be get involved with them, because those are going to be people who are into the whole gun culture thing, gun lifestyle thing, who are also women who understand the needs that are going to be probably more likely needs that ladies are going to have that I'm just not going to understand, or that I just don't know about. And so I hate to kind of just give blanket of advice there, just going, because it really depends on what you need as an individual. And I say that to the fellas as well too. You know, what works for me. You know, I'm 5'9". I'm not going to say my weight here because I need to lose a bunch of it, but I'm a pretty hefty dude. And so with that, and you know, I wear cargo shorts or pants with a t-shirt over it, pretty casual most of the time. And because of my size, my dress style, I conceal a full-size handgun on the strong side of my hip every single day. It's not going to work for somebody who wears skinny jeans and weighs $120, you know, 6.5 feet tall. It's going to be different. So you've got to find what works for you.
Yeah, no, I think that was a great answer. Conversely, what you were saying, even for the ladies, I think that's great advice. Especially, I didn't know there was a chapter for ladies, and I think that's a smart move. You're right. We don't, you know, have dresses. We don't. Well, hopefully, come on, y'all. We got to be alpha males here, but we don't have dresses, and you know, they deal with the whole bra thing and all that good stuff. But that's actually great advice. So definitely gonna swing it by my wife, but I do want her to. You know, be able to defend herself. I conversely want to teach my kids and my daughters, but that's all the process. It sounds like. I got one more question for you here. Go ahead.
Shoot, man. Go for it.
Oh, okay. No, and this is, you know, we have to gravitate, I guess, a little bit towards Bitcoin, but I do want to give an example and a comparison here. So I'm not sure if you know what the Beef Initiative is, if you've even heard about it, but it's
beef like in cattle. Because I
correct.
like beef, like steaks. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So, and you know, there's a gentleman, older gentleman in Texas Slim who came out of retirement, 6th generation rancher, and he's basically has this initiative where like we need to decentralize the food, right? And the motto, the TLDR is go out and shake a rancher's hand, right? Like make sure you know where you're sourcing your meat from, where you're getting your meat from. But where I'm getting at is that they've actually, you know, not used, that's the wrong term, but like they've embraced the Bitcoin community and we decentralize the meat, we decentralize the food. We actually give, you know, real food from real cattle and we get paid in Bitcoin. Now, crossing across to the gun community, you would think that sovereign money and sovereign defense would go together hand in hand, sort of like those two things go. Have you heard anything about, you know, the gun community and Bitcoin? Is that even a thing? Is it besides the dabbling of okay. Is there good examples of that?
Yeah, well, my local gun store actually was one of the first people to install one of the Bitcoin ATM machines inside of the store for a while. I do believe I've never done it. I didn't get too deep into it, but I think you could even actually make your purchases with Bitcoin.
Love it.
Now,
okay.
Granted, that still has to go through. To maintain his license and all that stuff, it has to go through the background check and all that process, and so it still gets logged and you got to fill out all that paperwork and whatnot, but the monetary transaction I believe can be done in Bitcoin. Awesome. There are other stores as well too. I've seen a couple pop up online that you can buy accessories using Bitcoin and that kind of things. I'm seeing more of it being accepted as a form of tender in that community. And to a certain extent, I mean, it's not really the same concept here, but there's a lot of places that will deal in cash still. And that at least to a certain extent, that's still very anonymous. At least the transaction itself, right? There's certain transactions that aren't anonymous in their nature because they do have to have the background checks and all that good stuff. But
right.
It's there. It's not as prevalent as I would like it to be. But it's, I've seen it. I don't know how rapidly it's spreading, and it's definitely not as prevalent as I would like it to be.
Well, we gotta work together to make that happen. So,
yeah,
we gotta start setting up either trainings where you pay with Bitcoin, or there's actually a gentleman. He's doing this more in like, you know, food and restaurants and businesses, but it's called the Oshi app, and you could just basically walk in and, you know, set up within 10 minutes to accept Bitcoin, and then you can give like basically coupons or incentives for people to pay with Bitcoin, 20% off, 25% off. But yeah, I was just wondering, this is happening in food for sure, from the ranchers and the farmers all the way down to the regular taco shop. But it would be incredible, and I think it would go hand in hand with the gun community. So I was very
Yeah, I
curious
like
about
it. I like it. I'm trying to think. There may be some gunsmiths that I know that do that. I mean, obviously, peer to peer still works, right? I mean, because we can still do private sales and that kind of thing, and we want to do it with Bitcoin. We are more than welcome to do whatever form of tender we want to exchange.
Yeah, just to be able to, like we talk about just being able to like store the value and not, be inflated away, right? Not have this money just be under the control of government, right? So if you're like your experience, for example, just to use an easy example, all the years that you stacked up learning, how to work a gun and you can train somebody, you shouldn't be getting paid in money that could basically be inflated away, right? And can be melted away or is under the control of them, meaning that it's just worthless money. You're just getting paper, right? On the other hand, I could, similar to, gold back in the gold standard, I could, provide you this bearer instrument, right? This property that you have possession of and can do anything you want. I mean, you can liquidate it and get fiat for it, right? Absolutely, if you need to pay some bills. But for the most part, you can hold it there and you can hold it for as long as you need to hold it and be able to transfer that over to your children and not lose the value of that wealth, of that time spent teaching somebody how to defend themselves. And once again, I just think it goes hand in hand, right? It's just one of those things. So when I get down there, if you're game, man, I think we should figure something out and try to get these two communities talking.
You're giving me ideas because I'm actually working right now on getting becoming a certified firearms trainer myself. And
yeah, man.
I'm not looking at doing it for the money. I'm not looking for a career change. I'm looking at more to just be a better instructor because there's been a lot of people who've been asking me to teach them and those kinds of things, and I want to be able to do that. One of the challenges that I've seen is, especially when it comes to self-defense, is the folks who are most likely to find themselves in a situation where they need to defend themselves are also the people who don't tend to have a lot of means. And so being able to make that accessible to people in different financial situations and whatnot is probably something that I'm going to be looking to do as well. And so you give me ideas here and kind of going, well, we don't necessarily have to deal in cash. There's other ways that we can do this. And maybe there's different ways to sponsor, making training available to people who are trying to survive, man. It's
yeah. And it's Bitcoin is the perfect community for that, because it's literally the platform for the disenfranchised, not only around the world, but around, here in the States, to be able to basically even keel the world, right? So all this credit bullshit and all this other stuff, Bitcoiners understand very well that they can, buy $1 worth, or they could buy, $150,000 worth, and they're in the same ballpark as the rich, right? There's no classes there that separate Bitcoiners. So yeah, you'll be surprised how many people would not only support, but would be willing to transact this bearer asset to be able to get your skills. There's actually something that I do in this podcast called value for value, right? And the concept is my listeners never have to hear the bullshit advertisement and go through that revenue, because they can literally stream me sats, which are increments of Bitcoin, as they wish. So like you can send me 2 cents worth of Satoshis if you want, or you can send me $150 worth of Satoshis. And what that opens up is an even playing field where you can donate to the show and not have to, there's no middleman in between that to take the cut. There's no Spotify to take a piece of it. There's no Visa taking 2.5. So in your example, you give somebody an invoice, they have to pay it in Visa. Well, 2.5 goes to Visa and then the rest goes to you. With Bitcoin, 100% of it goes to you, and then you can choose to liquidate whenever you want. And I know you're not doing it for the money, but it's just an example of how you remove that middle person, and it allows you to now provide more value to the people that you're training, because you're basically getting the value up front and they're getting to you direct. But we can talk about it offline for sure.
Yeah, man.
And it's something that the farmers and the ranchers have taken very serious as of late, for good reason, because of all the shitty food that's out there, and ranchers know this best. But I think the gun community would just be the next logical step, and I think Texas is the place to do it, of course. So one of those things we'll talk about. But
yeah, well, when you get out here, man, let's look into all those things and
yeah, man,
get you shooting, and Yeah, that'll be fun.
I could be your first client if you're prepared, man, and I will pay in Bitcoin 100%. That's all I pay with, actually. So,
I mean, I'll gladly accept Bitcoin donations any time of the week. So, just give me a holler and send me some Bitcoin, and I'll be your friend. It's all good.
I'm about to let you. That's funny. I'm about to let you plug in your blog, which is excellent, by the way. But on that same level, we can even get you a Bitcoin donation button on that blog, so people could actually hit you up. But Zo, it's been extremely fantastic. I don't want this to be the last time, and nor do I think it'll be the last time. And thank you for coming on here on the fly. Please let the listeners know where they can, absorb all the knowledge that you have to give and where they can follow you.
Yeah, for sure. The easiest way to get a hold of me or to find any things that I'm working on and tinkering with, and the way that I like to kind of say it here is come learn with me, because I'm on a journey of learning too, and just sharing what I'm learning along the way. But regardless of where you're at in your journey, if there's things that I can teach you or you want my opinion on things, I'm always happy to share them. And the best place to get a hold of me is on my blog, which is UncleZo, UncleZo.com. And from there, you've got links to social media, which I'm most active on Twitter. I know we spend a lot of time sending DMs and shit posting. Can I say that? Shit posting?
Hell yeah, especially in the Bitcoin community. That's what we do.
I always forget, regulations, FCC, all that good stuff. But whatever. Screw the man.
Yeah, fuck them.
So yeah, I'm active on Twitter. There's a Facebook link on there that sometimes I'm on. I know some people connect with me over there, and then also on Instagram as well too. I've got a link to a really terrible YouTube channel as well too that I haven't done much with. I'm getting nudged by various people to do more video stuff, so I'm gonna maybe put out a little bit more video content. But yeah, the blog is the best place, man. I've got tons of information there from anything that you want to know regarding hunting, competition, self-defense, lots of pistol stuff, lots of rifle stuff, everything from literally a small pocket-sized 9mm handgun to rifles that can shoot out to a mile, and everything in between. So come check it out. And if you have a question, do not hesitate. Hit me up on any of the social media platforms. I do respond to every single thing that comes my way, unless you happen to say something that's completely moronic, then I'll probably just laugh at you. No, I'm kidding. There are no stupid questions, especially when it comes to this. Especially if it's gun related, guys. I do take this very, very seriously. I want to share knowledge. I want you guys to have the best information available to make the best decisions for yourself, your safety, and your family. And there's just so much, I'm not even going to get into the propaganda that we're hearing right now with the gun bans and everything that's there, and sensationalism. But even without that, there's a lot of myths that I've stumbled across and kind of had to learn the hard way, not because I hurt myself, but more because I've made bad financial decisions in my journey to learn myself. So if I can help you avoid any of those, ask away any gun-related questions, I'm happy to share what I know.
Yeah, no, and I definitely vouch for Zo on that every time, although it's not been many times, but every time I've needed anything, Zo's been here, including this episode here. So definitely check out Zo. Zo, I appreciate you, brother. For the listeners, that wraps up episode 69. As I was telling Zo a little while ago,
69.
69. Isn't that some shit? It wasn't on purpose, though. But 69, y'all. But like I was telling Zo, the best way to contribute to the show and show love to the show is just to stream us some sats. My favorite way to do it is on Fountain app. You can check out, just like every other podcasting app, you could subscribe to the show and you can send us from a penny all the way up to whatever you feel the value you're getting. There was a ton of value in this episode. For video, you can catch us on Bitcoin TV. That's our favorite place for you to go. That's the up-and-coming platform that Bitcoiners use to share video. We are also available on the legacy platforms. So if you want to check us out on YouTube, you want to check us out on Spotify, the best way to support there, the old school way, rate, subscribe, share. It really helps us. It helps us go a long way. But if you've never tried it, definitely check out the Bitcoin products and stream us some love. That wraps up episode 69. I appreciate you, Zo. I appreciate y'all. Catch y'all next week.
All right.
Later.
Thank you, sir.